public. Unfortunately, in part, where the money is going, and this is the rationale behind FOI. Rational, and I think the analogy that Roland always makes of the cook in the house, it's the best analogy. Funnily enough, FOI later, Pakistan was the first in the region, but it has a number of flaws which are Balochistan, they put up a similar act in 2005, Sindh in 2006, and the other provinces are now following for the simple reason that as per the 18th Amendment, right to information is now part of the Constitution. I know that the Punjab government is looking through the various drafts, and we said that give us the assessed value of regularization versus the actual payment. We didn't even get into the can of firms and how they made the assessment. How did they say that it, but we didn't go to that. We just said that tell us how much buildings that were regularized. Next, please. We asked for the plot numbers, the payment assessed, actual payment received, and it went off. No, absolutely no reply. Then again we went, and the file number 0/DG1, in case any press person wants to publish it, please do so. Okay, please next. The scrutiny fee, the composition fee, the approval. But they didn't give the information we wanted. We said that what was the assessment per building and what was the payment received. They didn't give that. Next. Again, we went as per our FOI request. Every month KPA says some nonsense or the other, or they don't reply at all. And this is ongoing for the past 1 year. I have not put all the correspondence, otherwise we'll be here till 8 o'clock just going through that. Next, please. Again, they sent some very confusing stuff that, oh, well, this is this and this is the payment, but he said, just tell us this information. But they just didn't do that, and we said, okay, maybe these
4 months passed, nothing happened. That much for the respect of law by its own custodians. So in January, I take the next step of going to the Ombudsman. So I go to the Ombudsman and make a request that my original request be met. Unfortunately, nothing happened again for another 3 months. Now 7 months have passed from the original request to appear before the Ombudsman and also ask the Environmental Protection Agency to appear and explain why they did not give the information. So I go back to them again and they say, don't worry, we'll write to them and we'll call them again. I said, yes, you can call them again, but then you're calling me also again and again, remember? And I am a daily wager person and I lose my day's earnings every day when you call me here. So I'm being punished now. Anyway, in May 2010, which is 8 months after my application, I receive a letter from EPA. And you recall my 2 requests. They were, give me the list and the names of industries which are not violating the NEQS, and second, the amount of effluent. Now here is the reply. It is comical, humorous, ridiculous, whatever you might like to call it, but this is exactly the reply. As per information provided by Site Limited Kotri, 288 industrial plots in Kotri are allotted for industrial activities and 98 are in production. But it has been observed physically after conducting monitoring exercises that only 68 are actually in production. Now this has nothing to do with what I had asked for. The reply to the second question, amount of effluent going out of Karachi untreated. Yes, there are 3 major environmental issues: effluent, solids and air emissions. In routine activities of CEPA, if the industries are found violating the rules, the legal proceedings are initiated accordingly. Okay. Now, 8 months of follow-up on case study 1 resulted in a complete loss of my time and effort. I would slightly disagree with the Shehri's recommended policy of hammer, hammer and hammer. I mean, we are civilized people. We need to do things in a slightly more correct manner. Second, that through delays and incoherent responses and bad English, the department concerned won the battle of not providing the information. I stop here. Case study number.
Rizvi, who's been kind enough to join us on my request, and in fact she was planning to come. I should think she was having a problem, but I requested her, okay, madam, I'd like you to be there and perhaps even give your comments later on. Now, sorry?
Speaker's name dragged.
अच्छा, ये बताइए कि access to information, it's a fundamental right, would you agree or not?
Yes.
All right? At the same time, it is just like freedom of speech and expression. How much of here we consider ourselves fairly enlightened and sort of informed citizens? How many of us here today are familiar with the Access to Information Act? Anybody?
Depends what sort of information you're
Wait, the Act itself. How many of us are aware or perhaps utilize it? I knew Roland would definitely turn up there. Okay, we have to. You see, fault hamara bhi hai. Basically, I've always made the statement because I'm involved in consumer protection कि सबसे बड़ा दुश्मन पाकिस्तान में कंज्यूमर और अवाम खुद हैं अपने आप के, because they're just not bothered. Now, if you're not bothered, why would you've seen the system of governance in Pakistan? The system of governance does not exist, and if the awam itself is not bothered with it, why should anybody go? I mean, we have classic examples of the ombudsman. We have a gentleman at the back here who just gave me his card, who's been working with us on the KSC issue, where he was billed wrongly for about 10 lakh rupees, or I don't know how. Then he said, "Hey, Mr. Zahoor," and he went to the ombudsman. It took him 2 years to get the judgment, and he can't even get a copy of the judgment from the ombudsman. Can you imagine? I mean, he's gone to the ombudsman, the judgment is in his favor, and yet he cannot get a first name. Similarly, when we filed a petition against the KSC, Shehri and a group of all of us, concerned citizens, we asked for a copy of the privatization, क्या कहते हैं वो जो bill हुआ था वगैरह, plus various other issues, and we jointly wrote to this Access to Information to please provide us copies of that.
What means,
The privatization of KSC.
Privatization, what?
The privatization, the whole lot, and then all the NEPRA bills and all those things that were coming in. And even now, despite of our repeated reminders, and we were just being stonewalled. So, and I don't know how, I mean.
And Prime Minister Malik Miraj Khalid, of which this आपका गुलाम नाचीज भी फर्क था, और मैं इत्तेफाक से उस कैबिनेट कमेटी का मेंबर था जिसने वो ड्राफ्ट किया, and it was one of the last 2 laws that we promulgated. और उम्मीद ये थी कि एक मुंतखब हुकूमत जो हमारे बाद आने वाली थी, माशाल्लाह नवाज शरीफ साहब की जो दूसरी हुकूमत आई, जिस तरह ऑर्डिनेंस को 4 महीने के अंदर एक एक्ट ऑफ पार्लियामेंट में कन्वर्ट करना जरूरी होता है, अदरवाइज द ऑर्डिनेंस लैप्सेस। लेकिन बहुत अफसोस हुआ कि एक जमहूरी सिविल सियासी हुकूमत जिसको आप ही ने वोट देकर मुंतखब किया था, उसने उस कानून को दानिस्ता तौर पर रद्द किया, rejected that law. So there was no question of implementing the law. Or ironies characterize our history. It was during an unelected government, जिसका फिर मैं गलती से मेंबर था, जनरल मुशर्रफ के दौर में सन 2000 में हमने उस लॉ को रिवाइव किया और कंसल्टेशंस के जरिए finally it was promulgated in October 2002, when fortunately for the government I had already left, but it was my responsibility as Minister of Information to revive and to conduct consultations on the law. एक दूसरा उसमें एक जुमला था आपके सर्कुलर में कि the first law was promulgated largely at the urging of the Asian Development Bank. बड़े अदब के साथ गुजारिश है, न 1997 में, 1996-97 में, न सन 2000 में, न सन 2002 में इस नाचीज पे किसी किस्म का प्रेशर था. This was purely volitional. हमारा अपना ख्याल था दोनों दफा کہ یہ قانون ہونا چاہیے، اور کبھی ہم خدا نخواستہ کسی کے کہنے پر، البتہ ضرور بات ہے اگر کوئی اچھی بات کروا رہا ہے یا کہہ رہا ہے تو ہمارا فرض ہوتا ہے کہ ہم اس کی بات سنیں، لیکن اس کیس میں اس غلطی کو ہم نے ہی خود شروع کیا. To step away from the current 2000